Most of the women I work with, you are already self-aware. You've already done quite a bit of internal growth work or inquiry. You're not new to the world of self-development or work around becoming a more integrated, healthy, authentic self. At least you've dabbled. You may have done a lot of therapy, you've read books, you've gotten degrees. You know how to work hard. You know how to do hard things. You know how to show up for people. And often, what is true, but actually most often, as in like almost all the time, when I'm working with a woman, what happens is she knows how to do all of those things I already mentioned, but doesn't show up for herself. She devalues her own wants and needs. And doesn't really know what to do about this problem. And on occasion, somebody comes to me and says, I don't even know what I want and need. And usually that is a very short-term issue. And very quickly we get under the hood and we realize that isn't true. She knows what she wants and needs. She just doesn't want to allow herself. She feels guilty or she feels stuck or she doesn't know how to take action. Usually the women I work with already have this internal wisdom that is calling them towards something. And it could be they want to move their bodies. They want to have more alone time. They want to travel more. They want to work less and prioritize more fun in their lives. Like they already have a sense of what they want, and they don't know, though, how to get across that bridge. They don't know how to take that first step, or what their pattern is that they take a couple steps and then they fall off really quickly. They don't know how to get back into what they, valuing and prioritizing what they actually care about. So many of us have this pattern where we want something and we get pulled off track or distracted very, very easily. And so this episode is about why it is so important that you stop deprioritizing your own wants and needs, and you learn how to not just have good intentions, but you learn how to follow through. So I want to offer up a rough smattering of what happens sometimes, like when we're in our real lives and maybe we've built out our weekly rhythm and we've even put in time blocks for the things that we actually want and need. But we very easily get distracted, pulled off track, out of focus. So I want to just offer up some ideas. These aren't all the possibilities, these are some of the possibilities. So pay attention to what stands out to you as most true for yourself in this season. One of the biggies is that as soon as there is a distraction, a shiny idea, a noise, sometimes a literal noise, sometimes the noise of the world, we we jump out of focus. And the reason that we do that is because we feel uncomfortable. We feel uncomfortable in our bodies. And so we might say that we're doing this for somebody else, but really what's happening is we don't know how to be in discomfort. And so we shift focus to alleviate our discomfort. So this can look like procrastination or avoidance, but it can also look like you're trying to focus, you're trying to do the thing, and you might even show up to, whatever it is that you want to be doing or creating or doing more of, in your life in this season. And as soon as you get a text, as soon as, something, there's the noise in the world, as soon as you notice laundry undone. Like it can be anything. You quickly alleviate the discomfort you're feeling in yourself and go do something else. And there are lots of roots here, like of what can be motivating this pattern. And we're not going to be delving into this today, but I do want to point out that one of the primary reasons that we do this, we do it to alleviate our own discomfort. But one of the primary reasons we jump to fix for other people, like adult children, our partners, work, work asks you for extra help, whatever it is, we actually we think that it's altruistic. And on the surface, it might even look compassionate or altruistic. But I'm going to propose that very often what is true is that we jump into fixing for others or doing for others to alleviate our own discomfort. And I'm going to tie this to something that might seem unrelated, but I think it'll help kind of form that connection. Is that in grief work, if when we, I don't know if you've been in a time of grief before, but maybe you've been the fixer, maybe you've been the recipient of this type of fixing. But if you are grieving, often the things that people say that are the most frustrating or even hurtful or harmful, they do it to alleviate their own discomfort. They don't know what to do because we don't have a lot of experience in this world, like being really open and confident in engaging with grief in our own lives or with each other. And they're noticing a lot of pain or discomfort. And so they offer you a pat answer or I don't know, just some, oh well, they're no longer suffering. They're at peace now or whatever. They offer you this solution. It's not really for you. It's for them. They do it to alleviate their own internal discomfort. And it's really helpful to know that because it can help realize that even if something comes across as really inappropriate or harmful or just not helpful or kind, we can at least try to create some distance and see, like, oh, they're trying to alleviate their own discomfort. They don't know how to be in this place. So we do the same things though. If our adult child, say, texts us and they're upset, or there's something going on in our family, and we jump out of our own wants and needs to jump into fixing or carrying or taking responsibility for another person, very often what's really happening is that we don't like the feeling of discomfort, and so we want to fix for ourselves. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that there. You ponder for yourself. Now, another reason that we do this is that we just have been brought up this way. We've been conditioned to default towards serving and prioritizing other people's wants and needs. As women, this is a thing. And again, this is not just women who have chosen to stay at home and tend to their families or homeschool parents. This is also women who are practiced at running companies or running an emergency room. Like women who know their competency and they have this strength and this competency and ability to lead or, do hard things and be brave and take care of business in other realms of life. But as soon as they come back into the home front, let's say, they default back into this pattern. It's really interesting. It's been really interesting for me to witness this because I work with women who come from all sorts of different backgrounds, and I can see these common threads. So there is this default that we just automatically ignore or move out of focus of what it is that I was doing for myself, what it is that I need or want in this season, right into responding to other people. And I'm not talking about crisis. I'm talking about day-to-day stuff. Everything can feel urgent. That's another issue. And being in a world and this season of life where we have 24/7 news cycle, access to social media and everything, literally it can feel like we're being screamed at all day, every day. And when everything feels urgent and we immediately, we just feel overwhelmed, we feel distracted, we want to kind of like learn like it's like thinking about, for instance, all the issues in the world right now. We could scroll perpetually, like we could just never leave social media, or we could decide that we have to become educated about every issue going on, and really taking responsibility and saying, I do want to become more educated about these issues or whatever. Now that sounds really like noble, right? And there is a place for that. But we can't become historians, and we can't become experts on international politics, and we can't become, the experts of all the things. And so when we don't know what to do with this constant urgency, we default into distraction or numbing or deprioritizing one way or another our own wants and needs. Now, that doesn't serve us, that doesn't serve other people. But one of the reasons that this happens, it's not just because there is a lot of noise. The noise is there. We don't control for that. We have to learn how to focus our energy. We have to learn how to get clear on our own growth edge. That's language that works for me. And all that really means is we have to have the skills, the strategies, and the practice to name what we most prioritize, want to prioritize in this season of our lives. And that helps quiet the noise or put some blinders on. So if we were talking, for example, about how to contribute to a world we want to live in, there are ways to do that. And again, I'm not going to delve into it in this episode, but I just want to point this idea out to you at least, that there are ways that we can identify what is within my realm of strength or gifting, and how can I use that to contribute to the world I want to live in. So this is an example of leaning into our strengths as opposed to leaning into our lack. So when we're scrolling forever and we feel disempowered by all the information, all the needs, and how much we don't know, we're not taking action. We're not being productive in any meaningful way. Whereas if we limit the scope and we say, this is the thing I'm passionate about, or here are a couple things that I am deeply invested in, and I'm not claiming expertise in them necessarily, but I'm willing to read and learn more. I'm willing to use my voice. I'm willing to get involved in these things. Now, all of a sudden, we shift into agency and we can actually make an impact. We're not like scattered everywhere. And I have a process for this, by the way. My whole life visioning course is built to give you this guidance. And just on one tiny bit of this is that I have these three key life filters that help us sift through all the noise, all the competing tensions and desires, and get really clear on where we're focusing our resources in this season of life. And that means in this year, in this season of the year, etc. Okay, I'm going to move on. So often this happens that we're so easily distracted or pulled out of focusing on what we say we want and need. And it's really just because we're foggy on either why it matters, but I'm going to talk about that shortly. But what are the next steps? So a lot of people I work with, you don't have a natural strength in breaking down an idea or a vision or a desire into the practical action. And that's where I come in because I'm really good at this. So I can help you take your goal, take your vision, take the longing or the desire and bridge the gap and say like, hey, so how do we create this? What are the steps in between wanting and fruition of the thing, right? So there's a whole skill set in between those two things. And when somebody is foggy on even the next little step or the next three little steps, they'll be prone to inaction and avoidance and distraction. So one, simple way is like whatever it is that you've decided is priority even for today, you could try this instead of just having sort of this thought like I don't know, like I'll just choose something on my in my planner for today because it's right in front of me. Oh, this is actually from January, but I needed one of my top threes for that day was to write part two of a module for my Brave and Beautiful community. That is way too big of a task, right? What does that mean? Now, I have other places where I've broken down that task. I know exactly what the pieces are. So by the time I get to that day and I'm fulfilling that task and bringing it to completion, I've already done all of that breaking down process. I have the map, so to speak, and I'm like filling in the blanks. So for whatever is on your task, on your, let's say, I don't know, this idea just popped up. Let's say you need to shop around for a new insurance quote. Well, for any of us who hate phone calls or, honestly, we'll avoid that forever. Way too big. But we could break down that task into the tiniest little action steps. Research three Canadian companies that offer this type of insurance. Gather the phone numbers. We just start breaking it down into these tiny little steps so that we're not foggy. And even if we feel uncomfortable, we can at least choose one thing on the list that feels doable today. Okay, one of the other really big obstacles or places of resistance is that we have leaky boundaries. And leaky boundaries could be like any form of boundary. It could be an emotional boundary, an energetic boundary, a physical boundary. And it might require that you sharpen your boundary skills, that you take a workshop. I have a couple workshop replays that you could take, and they will walk you through for the first time or remind you of how do you identify a boundary? How do you communicate the boundary? How do you honor the boundary? What do you do when there's pushback? How to recognize a leaky boundary in your life. And I think I will point you in the show notes towards a podcast episode or a blog post around leaky boundaries. But this is a skill that you can build and practice, but we have to have the awareness of what this means. And so, an example of a leaky energetic boundary could be that if somebody else's moods or emotions are always dictating how you spend your days, that's a clue that you have leaky energetic or emotional boundaries. So, if your partner or child is unhappy, and especially if you're like a big feeler, you sense things all the time, you may really struggle focusing on the thing that you want to be doing because you can feel that mood. And so if you're somebody who has a really hard time honoring your own boundaries, doing the things that you want and need, because you're always hyper aware of other people's moods and emotions, you might want to do some deeper dive here. Um, okay, as a part of this though, I want to also address something that is very common, and that is that we actually have we could call it a leaky boundary and or we could talk about just poor hygiene around quieting the noise, like the actual noise in our lives just to create an environment that allows us to be present for what it is that we want to do. So examples of this are like cell phones. We've had research around how having a cell phone anywhere within your line of sight or having notifications on, how even if they're not currently making a sound, buzzing, beeping, whatever, that part of our brain is is distracted all the time. And I don't remember, I haven't reviewed this in a while, but it was at least something like 20% of the brain is just constantly on alert for the next notification. We have that awareness. Just like if you're a big feeler, there's a part of you that is constantly aware of other humans in the vicinity. And I think that was last episode that I talked about, giving ourselves alone time in our homes where we get to fully like decompress because there is no other human in our physical space. This is a real problem. And we do need to learn, easy or not, we need to learn how to create some noise boundaries that allow us to show up for the things that matter to us. So getting a phone, getting notifications off. If you're not on call for your work, you don't need to be carrying around a phone call or a phone rather. And even when I'm working with a doctor, one of the things that we might work with, and this is not uncommon, is that even if they have days off, it's really difficult to let go of having the device right handy 24/7. But that means that they never get to rest. So they need to come up with some strategies and notice what's happening for them and work on, permission to actually rest because of course it's urgent. They are in a career where there is true emergency, true urgency, and they still have to have times where they can turn off and take care of their own health. So we need to examine our habits, our hygiene habits around noise in our lives. So, do you really have to have your device with you all the time? Could you leave it in another room for an hour, for 2 hours, and then check it? Do you have to have sound on? Do you have to have notifications on, really? Can you close your door? Can you put a sign on your door? Could you use earphones? What else could you do to quiet the actual noise and create an environment that allows you to more easily focus on what you want and need? Whether that's lying on the couch reading a novel, working out in your basement, painting in your studio, whatever it is. Okay. And the final thing I want to talk about in terms of us deprioritizing our wants or needs, having really good intentions and really poor follow through or inconsistent follow through, is really around the whole story that we believe and carry around our value, our worth, and really how that shows up is that most women that I work with and meet have learned that their value comes from service. Their value only comes in taking care of everybody else's wants and needs and making sure that they are happy. So we pick up the responsibility for not only the physical care, but also the emotional, mental, spiritual care, relational care of other human beings. Now, if you choose to be a parent, obviously there is a season of life where you are responsible for these things. But even at 10 years old, your child has to start learning how to notice their own moods and emotions and not outsource that on another person. Now, again, whole other conversation, but we as adults often haven't actually learned this. Okay, so if we're still operating in that old pattern, that old conditioned way of being, then we really do believe that it is our responsibility to make sure everybody else is happy, everybody else is healthy. And not only that, but that they're always happy with us. Okay, so how hard is it to get anything done, right? To set aside containers for the things that bring us joy, that fill us up, that we're curious about, if there is this constant sense of we should be over there fixing, tending, picking up, carrying, doing all the work for everybody else. And this can be tender, but it's still important that all of us will go through a growth edge somewhere in the middle season of life, whether we're parents or not. We will go through stretching and relearning around what is mine, what is theirs, what am I responsible for, what can I let go of, what have I picked up somewhere probably early in my life and decided that this is how I get my needs met, this is how I'm good enough, this is how I get love, and witness this story and decide if we're going to carry it forward with us or if we're ready to let it go. All right, so we all deserve, we all have permission to be vibrant, healthy humans in every season of life, apart from the roles we play. So I love being a partner, a life partner. I love being a mom. I am deeply grateful for these humans in my life. They were my primary dream. Not everybody has that, but that was my primary dream above all. And I love these people and they know that I have their backs, but that does not mean they get 100% of my energy all the time. And they're older now, they're adult children. My husband is in his 60s, and we've had a lot of negotiation in our marriage and in our home as I've learned to stop doing everything for everyone and to really carve out space and honor that space for the things that I want to create. And it's so interesting because this does not happen to my husband. Even like I have a business, I pay the bills. I'm an equal contributor and I'm actually now taking over primary wage earner so my husband can retire. Yet while I'm building a business and earning money to support my family, I still have to wrestle with these feelings of responsibility and, am I allowed to ignore, the cell phone for a while and do my own thing and getting pushback and all the things. And it's just really interesting. Well, thank goodness that one of my core values is curiosity because I can approach this largely from that place and really notice how as women, generally speaking, we carry this and we have to do this grappling and freedom work in a way that most men, I believe, do not have to do. Now they have their own work to do, and life is hard for every human. We all have growth work to do. So it's not, yeah, so I'll just lay that there. But they are not conditioned to this in the way that we are. This is work that we uniquely do need to do. And so it will inevitably show up in the midlife season at some point. We don't need to feel guilty for having wants and needs. We're allowed to have wants and needs, and our value and worth is not in productivity, and it is not in keeping other people healthy and happy at least, but even healthy. Like once kids are of a certain age, um, they're making their own choices. They're literally living their own lives. And at best, we've created a relationship where they feel safe coming to us for maybe to ask for advice on occasion, maybe just to be witnessed. But we're not in control, right? So anyway, what are we in control of? We're in control of whether or not we're going to treat ourselves well and be a vibrant, integrated, healthy, joyful human in every season of our life. All right. I just need to look at my very rough notes. Okay. Yeah, there is actually one other thing I want to say as I wrap up today's episode. So there are four things, just briefly, I'm going to offer up four skills or practices that will help you get better at consistently showing up for the things that you want and need with less distraction, less being pulled out of focus constantly, less guilt. Okay, so they're all important. One, I'm going to list four, but not in any particular order. One of them is that the clearer your why, the stronger your conviction and ability to keep showing up consistently. And I already talked about those three key life filters I use. That helps solidify my why. And there are other ways that I do that in my work. But we need to have a strong sense of why does this matter to me again? And ideally, we wrestle, we do whatever we need to do. We write that down. We put sticky notes and reminders around. We date it so that as soon as we get wobbly, we can come back and read our own words and say, oh, yeah, that's why this matters. We need to learn how to be on our own side, what that means, because really being on our own side is about valuing ourselves, respecting ourselves, showing up for ourselves, building self-trust, and building the practices, the rhythms, the habits that remind us that we matter and we get to take up space in the world, and that our value is not determined by if another human is currently happy with us or not. We must learn how to be in discomfort. We must have a foundation or deep roots of self-compassion, self-awareness, and self-compassion to do this work. But we have to learn how to be in discomfort. At the start of this episode, I talked about how so much of our jumping into fixing is really about alleviating our own discomfort. We have to learn how to notice the discomfort and stay. And we can do this slow and steady. And there's so much, you know, strategy and ways that we can make this easier for ourselves. But ultimately, that is what we need to learn how to do. And fourth is we must build the muscle of consistent imperfect action. So we have to learn how to be in that discomfort, because learning how to go from all or nothing to all or something, or go from, it must be one particular way, must be perfect, must be easy, must be whatever, into I'm willing to be imperfect. I'm willing to do this in the messiness. I'm willing to feel this discomfort or self-doubt or vulnerability and take action because it matters to me. In order to do this, we're building this internal skill of consistent, imperfect action amid the messiness of this life. These four things will take you far. They require work, but they are accessible, they can be done. And today, even if you are wanting to take a next step, my Brave and Beautiful community, my life visioning course, or my one-on-one coaching are all ways that we can work together and you can build these skills. All right, until next time.